Downing Street last week, and tomorrow is to be bigger. Councils are saying, what does it say? Councils are, let me go, I lost it. And then councils are saying these systems have been hacked, all sham. I guess that's over in
They knew that from day one. See, aren't we back to the digital issue?
right.
So what are they convincing the people? Remember, they've been using digital among themselves for over 50 years. And the people think it's new.
ACH and all that stuff.
They think
Yeah.
it's new.
Yeah.
Now, look how many businesses where people have accounts, whether they're banks or even what you call trading platforms, stock platforms, and funds that people have investment in, and always a year or two after they tell you where their accounts have been hacked and they got everybody's private information, etc. And many people have totally lost their savings, etc. So what do you think they're going to do when they talk you into total digital? What do you think is going to happen? Is it going to be other than what's been going on anyway?
I don't know what this
Like duh.
King basis. What about
Like really duh.
what about the 10? This will be the last one. What about the 10-day martial law announcement from Trump?
Been in martial law since 33. It's back. Isn't this why we're doing what we're doing?
All right. 10 days, in fact. Well, this must be a more increased visible.
No, what is happening is coming out in the open. Meaning that, put it this way, they've been kicking your asses so thoroughly that they're stopping pretending anymore. Meaning they took all the mask off and kicking your ass in your face.
Yeah.
They're not wasting finance on programs to fool you. They're just being blunt. That's all. It's not new. They've been kicking your ass all the time. It's almost like people just, there's a psychology that people just don't want to recognize that these people are de facto. In the face of all evidence. You know, they took my grandmom's house and took my grandmom's land that we should have been inheritance, and then they stole my mom's land and my father's land. Then it looks like I think they're trying to steal mine too. Do you think that they're going to start stealing my? How many generations y'all need to recognize that these people are de facto? You know, years ago in civil rights marches and shit, you know, they beat up and killed Medgar Evers and other people, and they killed Martin Luther King. They've been killing more people regularly on the street and even now. What? Breonna Taylor? Come on, what? Do you think they're unlawfully murdering our people? Duh.
I'm going to do this one last question. I said that, but Portia Talib L. basis, can you please explain the importance of honoring thy parents?
Because that's the right of inheritance. Remember, when we was reading the congressional records where they're hypothecating people's property, keep in mind the first thing that they did, one of the first things they did, is take the people outside the human family with the branding system, which are known as nom de guerre, such as Negro, Black, and Colored, and Indian, and things like this. Get the people to agree to be these things that they're not. Therefore, they're not protected under the established laws of the land, which is treaty and constitution. Of course, not being a party to it, they have no defense mechanism. And at the same time, they have abandoned it. And keep in mind that liberties, rights, and inheritances, corporal and incorporeal, are inherited. They're not given by nations, states, or political agendas or political agencies established under the International Monetary Fund, nor under the Zionist order of the Federal Reserve. They already exist with you. Without the honor of your mother and father, you've abandoned your estate, and that's the hypothecation claims that they're making. Under the doctrine of discovery, all of that is documented. It becomes self-evident that anyone that does not honor their mothers and fathers logically do not have rightful claim to the inherited estates.
And when you say that,
Called honor your mothers and your
honor,
fathers that your days may be
in
longer.
deed, in spirit, honor them in word, deed, both.
And
What
action and in
actions?
sincerity.
Yeah.
Even the fact that let's look at this, Dr. Naila. How many people without any, what you would call deep research, as an example, one of the world's most awarded scholars and writers, right, in the world, his name was Joel A. Rogers.
Nature knows no color.
And Joel A. Rogers even wrote, and all of these scholars, Clark and James and all the rest of them, has researched him and had this knowledge even themselves, and find that all these people that call themselves people of color and black and so-called, they're always playing safe, the melanated people, rather than just say that the fact that these people are Moors, to avoid the telling the truth and then keep losing right of their estate. That is dishonor. And any man, woman, or child who won't confess their own has no right of claim of estate. That's estate law. That pre-exists colonial operations. So if you want to keep on calling the elephant a pit bull, keep on playing.
All right. We're going to go now. We want to thank each and every one of you for hanging in there with us. And thank you, Grand Sheik.
And sharing with us, yes.
Yes, always for a stellar class. We greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't sent us a dollar, a note, or something, please make sure you do. We want to make sure that we can properly say thank you to Grand Sheik, and as again, to support House of Reawakening Minds. Just want to make it plain that House of Reawakening Minds is the House of Reawakening Minds is still in existence, and we want to continue to bring you these and other classes. So.
In so much as the fact that everything that is done in social structure, in governmental principles, in running government, in dealing with rights and liberties, in dealing with rights of property or the lack thereof, in dealing with a challenge or question or any controversy concerning rights, properties, estates, inheritances, both corporal and incorporeal, territories on the aggregate land, rulership on the aggregate land, the exercise of powers, and the matters concerning authority operating on the land or in a political jurisdiction limited on the land, and the knowledge of the borders lines, both aggregate and also abstract in relationship to organized government and, of course, organized society. And also with the determinations in relationship to economic interchanges, trust systems which operate in government and in everyday affairs of economics, in relationship to estates, in relationship to inheritances, etc. And as you all know, these things or matters concern us every day in our everyday affairs. However, when you speak to our people in many of these areas of concern, you'll find that many of us are inadequate in relationship to comprehending jurisdictions and the importance of it, and also with many not recognizing that it affects every phase of your life in interchanging with other members of the human kindred and families, etc. So we're going to go over a few things concerning jurisdiction. And those of you, as usual, take pen and paper and write down some of these things, because these are points of reference that you're going to use in for tonight. and also in the future. And also whenever you're addressing, as an example, any contract, constitution, treaties, recognition of the connections between those instruments and or the lack thereof, the identification of parties in controversy in relationship to estates, land grants, land ownership or land claims, or jurisdiction or power over land, taxation, the lack of power to tax, the alleged or claimed authority to tax, etc. The ones or the persons who use political jurisdictions and or venues to issue or make claim or command a tax. All of these things concern jurisdiction. And you know, from probably your own experiences, and we've experienced it over the years, even when people begin to do a little study and research, you'll see that there's a continuous weakness in the area of comprehending jurisdiction. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the questions politically and economically that affect our people, and that will come up in different conversations relative to jurisprudence, which is the science that treats of positive law in society, period, coming from ancient Canaanite Moabites, i.e., and promoted around the world in organized structure by the Moors, etc., which is and are the Asiatic Africans collectively, etc. Although you have specific Moorish jurisdictions, etc., and they will have territorial nomenclatures, etc., that will distinguish the territorial provinces and kingdoms, etc. And having a concept, a proper concept of those jurisdictions will remove a lot of confusion that exists among the people. And keep in mind that that lack of knowledge and lack of information in relationship to political jurisdictions, social structure jurisdictions, estate jurisdictions, etc., rights and powers and exercises of jurisdiction, etc., has been lacking in our community. So I want you to write some of these things down, which I'm going to read to you, and you'll do, say, some research on your own in the future. At the same time, have some references to what we will discuss in general tonight, and then not be necessarily what you call wanting in your comprehension of what jurisdiction is about and the seriousness and importance of it, because it operates every day in all your affairs. Jurisdiction in general. So jurisdiction in general. Now this is ancient and modern jurisprudence, Henry Campbell Black's 4th edition, Law Dictionary, etc., deluxe edition. Jurisdiction. Now the word jurisdiction is a term of large and comprehensive import and embraces every kind of judicial action. Keep that in mind. I'm going to repeat because you really got to get this down and get this clear in your mind. Jurisdiction is a word and a term of large and comprehensive import and embraces every kind of judicial action. Are we clear? Now, jurisdiction is the authority by which courts and judicial officers take cognizance of and decide cases, meaning that's the authority that is used or which is delegated to them under standing or established law that is made is presented as in a term of law their license to act in a limited capacity in relationship to making judgments and decisions in harmony with the construct of treaty, constitution, or trust assigned to them with its limited parameters that would be within a construct, or what you would call a document that may be called a delegation of authority order. It could be called a power of attorney. In principle, this is what is meant when someone claims or is exercising power over another being, designated as a natural person, because person also means corporation. So when you just say person, they may be, you need to understand jurisdiction, because then there's the jurisdiction of the living, and then there's the jurisdiction of the dead. And when you have corrupt operators or persons who are claiming jurisdiction, and they are aware of the fact that many of the masses do not understand jurisdiction, what they have often done and what they've been doing, and which is also one of the motivations of me bringing this subject matter up, is that they will mix deliberately or transfer the corpse or the dead corporate entities that they may construct under legislative cause or legislative action that may have no relationship whatsoever by obligation or authority to the targeted beings or persons, natural persons, and designate them as dead, i.e. civil iter mortuus, under the guise of a corporate structure, which has been and is currently the practice at North America. And it has been used constantly and consistently by members of the Circle Church and the Chancery, which you know as the Bar Association or the British Accredited Registry. These people are known as lawyers and attorneys, etc., under the Bar Association, which is a foreign jurisdiction. That you must know. Anyone who claims to be a lawyer or an attorney operating on the land at North America under the jurisdiction of Morocco or the jurisdiction of the occupational corporate operation designated as United States Service Trading Company, etc., that jurisdictional power would be designated by virtue of a contract via treaty or constitution. The distinction must always be known by the people, because one of the problems that we've been having, particularly with our people who are the Aboriginal people of the land, is that false jurisdictions were created under corporate constructs and imposed upon the people who are the living, and then they have been declared artificially as dead politically, not physically dead, but politically dead. And then the operators under de facto venues and de facto anti-constitution and anti-treaty corporate entities have been used to steal people's estates, etc. And that venue of operations, which is well entrenched at North America, has been disguised under the Carlos Linnaeus term racism, which was generally imposed during the 1735 era on up, and has no origin in the ancient world as demonstrated at North America in modern contemporary times. And what you recognize is many of the people are not aware of that. And so as soon as, and as commonly projected among the people, like a psychic attack, and it absolutely is, the corporate ens legis operations of occupational people who are in fact not Americans, but who have been falsely claiming to be Americans, but who are really members of the Roman Curia under the Spanish Inquisition against the Moors, have been claiming to be Americans and have been claiming authority under treaty and constitution and exercising that said authority when no such authority is vested in them or exists with them. On top of the fact that those persons who are claiming to be Americans, and particularly white Americans, are in fact not Americans, and in fact have no green card, while they, under a color of law, have practiced imposing green card processes on Aboriginal people of the American continent, North, Central, and South, and the adjoining islands, and for the most part have not gone challenged, because have gone unchallenged and not sued in international courts or venues, etc., nor injured, nor attacked, but submitted to under false pretexts by people from the islands who are Americans, people from South America who are Americans, people from Mexico who are Americans, and people of the North who are Americans, who have been calling themselves brand names created under ens legis operations of the dead, called corporate entities, etc., which many people commonly refer to as 14th Amendment persons. And I know you've heard those terms, but people need to know what that actually is. And what the alien invaders have been doing under the guise of federal government, under the guise of state government, and keep this in mind, write that word down, that it's very important, under the guise of municipal government, under the guise of being legitimate creatures of constitution and treaty, etc., have actually set up a criminal enterprise that has been operating at North America, particularly under the de facto jurisdiction of the United States Corporation Service Company, acting as legitimate when in fact it is a criminal enterprise and is not lawful whatsoever. It's not opinion, that's fact. And the activities, the corruption and the activities that have been practiced, and particularly conversions of estates and probates jurisdictions which they have created, as an example, probate jurisdictions concerning rights and liberties that have been converted from the living to the dead are demonstrated in what you call Department of Motor Vehicles, with registration of vehicles, registration of cars, trucks, etc. And you know, and I know that the average person is not aware that those activities are actually violations of treaty and violation of constitutional law. But because people have been groomed under de facto governmental operations for so many generations, their concepts are that these instruments that they have been using under the jurisdictional powers of the United States Service Corporation owners is a legitimate, lawful creature operations under the Constitution for the United States, derived from Muslim law under the treaties, etc., which supersede that Constitution, but yet that Constitution obligates those who claim to be government officials to the treaties, etc., via Article 3 of that Constitution and Article 6 of that Constitution for the United States. And so the issues of jurisdiction, the issue of challenging jurisdiction, the issue of knowing or recognizing when jurisdictional barriers or lines, abstract and aggregate, are crossed or violated, needs to be known among our people. And what you will see by training, you'll hear almost every day in different political, social, economic, and intersocial venues, people constantly using this phrase, racism, prejudice, not knowing that they're actually given a cover word to cover up the organized criminal enterprise known as the U.S. government corporation that they have been trained is a country when it is in fact a private service corporation registered in Austria and also with a branch registered in France, etc. And also which has been duplicated about 4 times in actuality with what is called corporate succession passed to other corporate entities and owners generationally, and outside of that are in fact not even truthfully related. But yet, because of the word United States being used, the people are not aware who know better. People who know better usually are not talking, and people who don't know better think that they're discussing a company when they're not aware of the fact that they're discussing the operations of a human trafficking trading company, corporation operations that has been going on for a couple of 100 years at North America, and in particularly with the last 2 of the corporate constructs in violation of treaties and constitution that have been called the United States. One which you're familiar with, that was established in 1913 under the Ashkenazi operator known as Woodrow Wilson, and with some Roman Curia members of the Circle Church and the Chancery, which you've been told were lawyers, etc. And members of the board of directors for the secret treaty of Verona, under the authority of the Queen of England, etc., and the Circle Church, etc. And those persons you have been calling, unfortunately, for lack of knowledge of jurisdiction, you've been falsely misled and misrepresented in relationship to them, and you have been calling them senators and congressmen and congresswomen, etc. And you've been calling them governors of the states, and you've been calling them representatives of the legislature for the United States Corporation and Company, when in actuality, and keep in mind, these people know this, that they are de facto. And de facto in law, in layman's terms, you can call it impersonators, fraudulent impersonators, substitutes, deceivers, maskers, but in general, you would call them corporate artificial persons who are actually exercising de facto authority under violation of treaties and then under violation of constitutions, and pretending to have authority that they do not have, but nevertheless using that said authority to defraud the people, to rob people of their estates, to put their estates in what is known as jurisdictional probate. So write that phrase down. That's what you need to understand, that has been used for generations to gentrify certain targeted neighborhoods. And you know, and I know, the issue of gentrification has always been a problem in our communities, and our people have been trained under the black codes to keep talking about racism when that's not what's going on. What you have is jurisdictional probate under a color of law, under a de facto venue of criminal human traffickers who have been getting away with this for decades and decades and decades. And it is a known fact, but people have not challenged them. So we're going over jurisdiction so that you can have some comprehension of what your conversations should be when you're interchanging with these foreigners and aliens who have been getting away with pretending to be Americans for quite some time. In layman's terms, it would be safe for you to just make the distinction, the jurisdictional distinction, by putting the parties under these categories. First category of proper person and the true people of the land, i.e. Americans, that would be people of Canaanite, Moabite descent, sometimes referred to as Phoenicians, etc., Moors in general, etc., and in distinctive, limited format, descendants of Druids, which would be Sinde, which is falsely called Indian. So that must be understood so that you'll know who the real Americans are, distinguished from the hybrid, heterogeneous hybrid Albions who, under color of law and invasion, have falsely interjected into history, and particularly since the 1800s, where they really started reinforcing it, claiming to be Americans, which has become commonly claimed and commonly assumed and commonly presented in law text, legal text, history books, etc., but is absolutely and violently false. And in that area has come much of the economic distress that not only the people of America are feeling, but people around the world, and is at the root of most of your wars that have been taking place. And these are coming under jurisdictional probate. And this is false claims, and most of them are rooted in what you know as the unum sanctum operations, where the popes of Rome, which is the representative head, etc., for the hybrid Albions, claiming to own the souls, the property, and the lives of every man, woman, and child on the earth, particularly first target being Canaanite, Moabite people of Asiatic African descent, commonly known in the history books before the Black Codes, commonly known as Moors collectively. Now, that's the fact. And this is, again, when why people who know this information and know the real history operating in the political jurisdictions, particularly at North America, get quite uncomfortable and upset when you bring these facts to the fore, because what it will begin to do is generate thought and generate research among the people, and they will begin to start changing their language, because what has been happening with our people, out of frustration and for lack of remedy and a lack of justice, etc., which is commonly argued, you'll see in the different political social venues. The fact of the matter is that the people are declared incompetent because actually they're arguing what is called a guided false argument, arguing racism and prejudice, when actually they should be arguing against false jurisdictions and jurisdictional probate, and also violations of territorial jurisdictions, as well as violations of in personam jurisdiction, violations of subject matter jurisdiction, and again, particularly of import to you is violation of territorial jurisdiction. And keep in mind, all of these issues of jurisdiction come into play every day. And I'm assuming, but dealing with people from around the country for years, I can safely say most of them really still don't get it. And it doesn't mean that persons who have assignments of different organizations are not aware of this, because they absolutely are. Because of the corruption of the politics and the inbred corruption of organized corporate entities disguised for so many generations as government, they have been assumed to be legitimate. And so even when people are trying to bring remedy and justice to themselves via the alleged creature venues of constitutions and treaties known as courts, consular courts, courts of special sessions, etc., which are commonly operative around the world, most of the people, particularly here, were not even aware that the venues that they have been calling courts were actually human trafficking venues and are not lawful courts whatsoever, and actually never were, particularly since around 1789, about that time. And about thereafter, almost all the courts that have been operating at North America has been under the control of the Circle Church and Chancery of the Bar Association, referred to in the Bible as the those Sadducees guys, and those who are stealing the widow's pennies, those who know the truth, and hinder the little ones from coming into the knowledge of truth, etc. That is specifically talking in modern terms. You would call them members of the Roman Curia. That's a fact. Pardon me. And it's important for you to understand jurisdiction so you can make discernment for yourselves, not because we're having this discussion, but because the people need to have a fundamental knowledge of these things themselves and be competent in all of their affairs. As an example, when our people, in their quest of economic stability, as an example, open up or apply for what is in their mind and in their mental training, and I quote mental training, a bank account, as an example. In their training, they're told that they have a bank account, as an example. When they make an application to the bench of the Pope, the bench of the Pope is also referred to as banks. The account that they're under the impression is their own personal account is actually a loan ledger, unsecured loan ledger account to and for the owners of that bench or bank, with that person who gives them fiat or any other substance of value being actually a secondary party by decree of conditional withdrawals thereafter, which means that all issuances, as an example, from the natural being going into a bank in the name of an account is on the ledger and in legal process an unsecured loan to the bank, quote unquote, an unsecured loan to the bank. So the account that you thought was yours, number one, is not secure, and you agreed to it, but they didn't tell you that you agreed to it. It's a loan to them. They didn't tell you that. It now comes on what is called asset side of their ledgers, which they didn't tell you that. And so now they have created what is known as a colorable jurisdiction, and didn't tell you that either. As an example, go ahead.
Fractional reserve banking
is a perfect example. In other words, that is an ultimate demonstration of fraud in relationship to that operation. It itself is not what you would call the jurisdictional argument. It is a result of the false jurisdiction representation for bringing about a platform by which that fraud can be exercised. That's what I'm making that clear.
Right, because what it does is it allows what they've written into their rules and regulations is that they take your money on deposit or your fiat on deposit, they loan it out to others, they normally get interest, and they don't even have the full deposits on hand where you are many to go to the bank and want to make a withdrawal. If there was a bank run, they don't even have that on deposit, because
the reason why they don't, because it is a fraud in the first instance under a false jurisdiction and a foreign jurisdiction, and in violation of the rules and the laws that govern contracts, because it's a misrepresentation, etc. So here we have people who first are lied to and told that they have money, which was also confiscated under alien, foreign hybrid European jurisdiction under invasion, unwelcomed invasion or hostile invasion, commonly known around the world as colonism. and then started burning books and altering books and then writing themselves in to the history book, claiming to be the people of the land and thus the owners of the land, i.e., creating a false jurisdiction by which this false paradigm of the alien hybrid Europeans being commonly called American, when in fact they're not and never were. Then using that foundation of false information to set up political jurisdictions in violation of the treaties that supersede the Constitution, that is the source of the jurisdictional authority of the seats of operation in political platforms and in legislative platforms and, pardon me, in judicial platforms and in executive structure platforms that have been operating on the land in territorial jurisdiction, exercising political jurisdiction in violation of treaties and constitutions, which is the source of the political problems that you're dealing with today, including the fact of the introduction of ritual murders on the street by contracted commercial mercenaries known as the gangs of New York, who became organized contractors to maintain this fraud, that are now known as Fraternal Order of Police, operating at North America as a military arm. It is actually a military arm, and that is a de facto jurisdiction and logically a problem, but it is done to preserve the corrupt and false platform of territorial jurisdictional claims as quote unquote a country, when in fact it is an invading body of organized alien foreign jurisdictions operating under corporate operations, de facto and bankrupted over and over again as government, etc. And so you have political jurisdiction violations, de facto operations as being legitimate jurisdictions. They, by virtue of their intent of operations, you have a constant problem of jurisdictional probate, etc. This is where they have taken marriage certificates and bundled them and have been selling them as bonds around the world until they were no longer accepted. And then most of you who've been doing a little bit of study are familiar with the alien hybrid European known as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when their private human trafficking corporation went bankrupt again in the late 20s. And they did House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session June the 5th of 1933. And he pledged the birth certificates as bonds to back their debt again for the new, next constructed Ens Legis United States Corporation Human Trafficking Trading Company that has been continuing the false venue of pretending to be the country when the country is actually Morocco under occupation under the Spanish Inquisition, which is really what's going on. So now you have, again, in personam jurisdiction violations, subject matter jurisdiction violations, constitutional violations, and definitively territorial jurisdiction violations. And I want you to write some of these things down. You may not remember all of them at the moment, but I need you to write these things down in relationship to jurisdiction. Get your pens and papers, all right? Now, as an example, in relationship to any claims that are made, like when, say, some alleged person who represents themselves as some municipal officer, they represent themselves as that, of a city, as an example, which is also a corporation, of a town, etc. And they represent or claim to have authority in your affairs or your property, or taxing you, or licensing you and things like that. Your counter to that would be called an aberrament of jurisdiction, and that thus either in its nature a challenge of the jurisdiction, in fact that they must show quo warranto where they had no jurisdiction in the first instance, or if they, under a color of operations, which they usually do, seize jurisdiction under a color of law, then that would be in relationship to that in process, although it would be a colored venue, would be called an appellate jurisdiction. Get familiar with these things because they happen every day. Is that you need to be aware that they're happening every day. You know, so write these down. Appellate jurisdiction, concurrent jurisdiction, contentious jurisdiction, coordinate jurisdiction, criminal jurisdiction, excess of jurisdiction, which you've been suffering every day, exclusive jurisdiction, foreign jurisdiction, general jurisdiction, limited jurisdiction, pendent jurisdiction, that's P-E-N-D-E-N-T, pendent jurisdiction, probate jurisdiction, that's very important because it happens to you every day, special jurisdiction, that's a conditional jurisdiction where you may have a diversity of nationality or subject matter or issue of in personam jurisdiction, whereas a venue may be used by someone claiming a jurisdiction when actually they have no jurisdiction technically, and then they would have to go back to what you would call treaty or constitutional venues, and that generally would be called a court of special sessions, which we talked about like 30 years ago. We've been teaching you this area for about that time. And in general, the general presentment would be a special jurisdiction. That means the general jurisdictions that have been operative are incompetent and cannot be exercised. And this is, again, when it comes to aberraments of jurisdiction or challenging jurisdiction, these things must be well known among our people, and they need to stop talking racism, and they need to learn and understand that what they're suffering is abridgments of jurisdiction, and therefore they need to get commonly acquainted with what is actually going on and not what they've been told is going on. It's not the color of their skin, it's jurisdiction. It's not racism. Race is a paradigm set up particularly by some hybrid Europeans dealing with phenotype, and the most commonly well-known is Frederick Johann Blumenbach, and you have Carlos Linnaeus, which is the most common one, and you're dealing with the 1700s, which is used by the human trafficking trading company known as United States Corporation Company that has been falsely presented to the world in reconstructed history as the country, and logically the people don't know that it's actually a foreign corporate jurisdiction when they think it's a country jurisdiction. This is very important. This is why we're going over this. I know many of you already have this information, already know it, but because of the politics that are taking place right now with the world nation states ceasing to buy U.S. Treasury bonds, which were set up in around 1861-62, which is why they altered the congressional records so that the people don't see a lot of the shenanigans that were going on during that time. And they set up the treasury bonds to build a corporate structure to sell these bonds on the world, to the world, after the murder of Abraham Lincoln and the corruption of the issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation, and also the issue of manumission. Write that down. It's not the subject matter right now, but you're going to have that in the concept of your mind while you're looking at these things. Because the persons who you've been thinking were your congressmen and your senators are dealing with these various issues that I'm talking about right now every day, as they have robbed you blind and created this economic problem that you're suffering from right now. That's hidden behind. And so you're really dealing with jurisdictional issues. And while you're looking at all of these things, look at jurisdiction. Now, so you're dealing with pendant jurisdiction, probate jurisdiction, special jurisdiction, summary jurisdiction, territorial jurisdiction, and voluntary jurisdiction. Now, what they've been doing, the organized criminals have been claiming that our people, who are the really Aboriginal and indigenous true Americans of the land, who was really Africans, etc., they're not people of color. That creates another false jurisdiction. When you hear the legal term or phrase people of color, that's actually a creation of an alien, non-human, artificial jurisdiction, and that would be called a voluntary jurisdiction when the people call themselves colored people or people of color, not knowing that it means artificial person. So that is a legal declaration of the beings natural, otherwise being natural, living, divine beings in human flesh, being declared as dead or corpse in law, and therefore outside of the venues of treaties and constitutions, and thus those principles of treaties and constitution that refer to and deal with the estates and liberties of the living does not apply to persons listed as persons of color, because that means artificial person, a semblance, a simulacrum distinguished from that which is real. So go in your law book and look up colored and colored persons, because we don't need to go into that because we've been over this for decades. You need to start really understanding what's happening. So now they have created a false paradigm and a false jurisdiction and gotten our people through ignorance of not understanding jurisdiction, claiming to be people of color, thinking it's a badge of honor, not knowing they told the world legally that they were legally and in law dead in law. That would be listed under what is called voluntary jurisdiction, and thus it would be considered in law process of rights and liberties and estates, etc., consent. And then the exercise thereafter would be what you would call jurisdictional probate. And so under that jurisdiction operations, this is how and why, like Franklin Delano Roosevelt and a lot of these board of directors claiming to be congressmen and senators have been able to float bonds and take finance or energy from the people here and give it to private foreign corporations, which are part of the Roman Curia in other countries. And I know you've heard these terms constantly. As an example, you can go to in many areas around the land at North America and see the poverty, the lack of resources of the people, the suffering, and yet the people that you thought were your congressmen and senators voted to send, as an example, 8, 10, 15, 20, 30 billion dollars to one of their pet project, so-called other nations, of which 90% of them have vestment because they are not really true Americans and never were. And they've been robbing you systematically, and you allowed it to happen because you thought that they were sending finances to other countries and putting the debt on you, and then calling that debt national debt when they are not nationals. They were putting it on the nationals.
I think they actually tell the truth because they call it foreign aid.
Of course they do.
And that's exactly what it is. They're foreigners and they're aiding themselves.
Yeah, it's of course. Now, and this is back to do the people understand jurisdiction? Because they're telling you what they've done.
Yeah.
It's just that our people not understanding jurisdiction, it doesn't dawn on them that they're telling the people to the face, we just robbed you under a color of law, and you've consented to it under voluntary jurisdiction. Why do you think they say with the IRS as a point of fact? Now you have another foreign jurisdiction operating on the land in violation of treaty and in violation of constitution, and they're saying to you taxes are voluntary. That's voluntary jurisdiction, and yet they impose it under a color of law mandatory and will steal your estate if you don't give it up voluntarily, which is an act of war. Now you have what? Foreign alien jurisdictions waging war against the people under the guise of being legitimate government, having no delegated authority whatsoever in personam, subject matter, and particularly territorial. And they have been getting away with it. And now you're all suffering from this economic blow. The systems that have been used to systematically rob you under the Spanish Inquisition has gotten so corrupt that it's collapsing the trusts of the world, and thus the trade windows of the world, and also thus the credit windows of the world, which is really what's going on. And unfortunately, many people who should be don't want to discuss these things. But I'm pleased to know, that a lot of the youth that are becoming conscious of what's really going on have been brave enough to speak up when a lot of the, alleged adults not only won't speak up, but are sorely afraid to even get into the subject matter. Nevertheless, they have participated in, and many of them are part of corporate jurisdictional organizations that come under the jurisdictions of many of these de facto corporate state jurisdictions, and exercise such powers in the name of dealing with the rights of the people, the liberties of the people, etc., when actually they are known and can be proven easily, once you understand jurisdiction, to be criminal operations and criminal enterprises by people that may look just like you, that you thought were operating properly in jurisdiction, when actually they're subdivisions of a criminal operation, i.e. known as the United States Trading Service Company, which is not a country, never was. Now that's the truth. Get over it and learn about jurisdiction. Or was it, I was feeling you was going to ask me something else.
I just wanted to say that a lot of people, like you said, are not aware of the fact that the U.S. Service Corporation is a corporation, not a country, and that the situation that we're undergoing right now is not national, it is global. Because of the tentacles that are more global, we see ourselves as separate, not realizing that yes, we will say sometimes that we are under occupation, but not realizing that just like we see when the U.S. would go over to, say, Vietnam or one of these other countries and take up, that's exactly what is going on here.
Now,